But I wanted just to start out by reading one of my favorite passages from the book so that folks can get a flavor for your argument here. You write, when we talk about life as a work of art, a story with a meaning, we're talking about metaphor, a comparison that conveys a truth. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed. That's a metaphor. At its simplest, the metaphor tells us that the kingdom is a very small thing that can become a very great thing. But of course, once you start to think about it, the meaning of the metaphor is far vaster and more complex than that. You have to plant a seed, tend it. Once it grows, it attracts more life, the birds in the tree. The meaning goes on, deeper and deeper. It's a huge idea. You could think about it forever. If this weren't so, we wouldn't need to use a metaphor. We could simply say the kingdom is a very small thing, but it can become important. That just doesn't do the trick. We need the metaphor to convey and experience the full meaning. In some sense, all language is metaphor. The word love is not love itself. It's a small term we use to describe the vast experience. And since, as Hamlet teaches us, our lives are the language of the meaning of our lives are a metaphor. A metaphor has three parts: the object we are trying to describe, the term we use to describe it, and the idea that is conveyed when the two come together. In this, a metaphor is itself a metaphor for the Trinity. In the Trinity, the object we are trying to describe is God the Father. The term we use to describe it is Jesus the Son. And when we grasp that idea, we are filled with the Spirit. The Trinity is a fractal. It is the pattern of all creation that is repeated in every aspect of creation. Everywhere, in everything, there is always the object, the term, and the meaning. It's a beautiful idea, beautifully expressed. And I've been talking, before you came on, I talked a little bit about the fact that this is like everything that matters kind of takes place in this artistic world of perception, which we've totally erased from our official idea about reality, right? Everything now has to be scientifically provable or it doesn't exist. And this book is in some ways an antidote to that. And so I wanted to start out by asking you, why is it that the Romantic poets are the inroad for you to this idea, to recovering the metaphorical meaning of really all of life?
Right. Well, it has a lot to do with what you just said about science, because this was a period when science was first exploding, really beginning to disprove some of the old superstitions, give people a new way of looking at things. And this whole idea of the Romantics has been misused and misinterpreted. It's always sold the same way. There was an age of reason. We had reason. Reason was one. We had science and reason and science. And then the Romantics came, and they didn't like reason. They wanted everything to be feeling, and they dismissed science. All of this is completely untrue. You see it in Steven Pinker's Enlightenment Now. My friend Jonah Goldberg, I love the guy, but he wrote about it in the Suicide of the West, and it's just untrue. The Romantics had a task to perform. This is basically the idea of the great literary critic Jacques Barzin, who said they were just all they didn't all think the same thing, but they were all trying to solve the same problem. And the problem that they were trying to solve was that the old ways of looking at things had fallen apart. And the new ways of looking at things, this pure reason, didn't work. And the reason they knew they didn't work is because they had led to the French Revolution, and the French Revolution was going to be paradise. It was kind of like socialism was in the 60s and communism, when people thought this is the future, everything's going to be great, everything's going to be equal. The French Revolution was just like that. They thought, kings are going to be gone. God is going to be gone. All this oppression we get from the church, all of it's going to be gone. Everything's going to be great. And of course, it ended in terror, in bloodshed, and finally in a world war. The Napoleonic Wars were 12 years of war across all of Europe and Egypt and much of the world that was important to the Europeans. So now people started to say, well, wait a minute, something is gone. Something has gone out of the world. Faith has gone out of the world. Trust in gender roles had gone out of the world. Trust in politics had now gone out of the world, because here was the political solution to everything, the French Revolution, and it had failed. And so these poets started to think, well, what is it? What is it that we had that we've lost? And how can we move forward into the future while restoring the things we used to have, namely a sense of right and wrong, a sense of the beauty of living, a sense of the internal experience of being a human being. This idea that the subjective world is pure opinion and your ideas are as good as mine and your morality is as good as mine, it's all false, and it's provably false. because we know people can be wrong about it. We know people can see dragons that aren't there. They can think they're in love and they're not. They can think that slavery is right and it's wrong. All of these things that you can get wrong mean you can get it right. And that's what the Romantics were trying to remember. Like, if we're going to lose the church, if we're going to lose our old traditions, how are we going to know how to go forward into the future? And that's what they were thinking about. And it's what we're thinking about right now today as some of the old forms disappear again.